Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. I know it's kind of a nice day out after a lot of rain, so if you're like me, you want to get out in your garden and get it ready for the winter, but I'm very glad that you're here. So today I'm going to be talking about the basics of composting. And before we begin, I want to thank Susan Cowling because I based a lot of this off of a talk that she did a number of years ago. So I was very thankful to have the slides for a base on this. So as Mitch said, my name is Phyllis Harbour and I'm a Lake County Master Gardener volunteer, and I've been one for a couple years now. So let's get into it. This is some information about where we're at, and if you have any questions, gardening questions, or questions about our program, gardening questions, you can call the helpline. So the outline of the talk, basically, the first thing we're going to talk about is unrelated to composting, but very, very important. And if you've come to any of these talks this year, you probably have heard about the spotted lanternfly, but it's so important we're going to beat it into your head. Then we'll talk about why composting is important and how it benefits you. And then what you can and cannot compost, because you can't just throw everything in the pile and expect to get beautiful soil. The science behind composting, and then using your compost once you have it, and then a little bit about different methods, types of composting, and then just a brief summary. So, spotted lanternfly. So they first appeared in Pennsylvania in 2014 and can now be found in 11 states in the US. And that might be low right now because that's always changing because they're always moving. In 2020, they were found in Jefferson County, Ohio, and they're now being detected in Lake County. So what they do is when they're feeding, they produce this stuff called honeydew. So it's like a very sort of sticky, sweet residue from their feeding, and it'll attract a lot of wasps and stinging insects. So this is the life cycle of the spotted lanternfly. The first one is the egg masses, and that's what they look like. They usually come between September and May. So the egg masses are being laid right now. Then we go to what's called the early instars. Between May and July, they look like these sort of prehistoric blue things with a kind of like a tube on the end. And then June and July, they turn into this kind of red insect. What I will say about these things, they're absolutely gorgeous, I think. But that's very deceiving. And then their adult stage between July and November, so even now, they look like this sort of beautiful iridescent thing, and they move really, really fast. So what crops are impacted? Still undetermined because we're still sort of learning about them, but we know that grape, nursery, hops, apple, maple industries, all in Lake County are in danger. So that's some pretty big monetary effects that these can have, especially when you're talking about grape. So our wineries around here, our apple and our maple industries as well. So if you see one, first take a picture of it, then report it. There's be some information on how you report it, and then kill it. And when I say I don't like killing any sort of insects, I'm the type of person who will take a spider or even an ant from my house and put it outside and let nature take its course if it needs to. But these I do kill, and they're not easy because they like to jump. But I like to play this game where I'm just kind of going around and stomping on them. And great exercise, get your steps in. And then if you see their egg masses, remember this is what their egg masses look like, destroy those. You scrape them off, maybe put them in a garbage bag, or maybe kill them with some alcohol or whatever, but get rid of those egg masses. So this is where you can report it. You can call this number, or you can email this site, also online. It tells you about invasive pests and other things other than spotted lanternflies. But report it, because what we're doing now is we're trying to see where it is moving. And that's very important. So if we see it heading towards a particular area, then we can basically alert those people and say, be on the watch out for it. And there's some references here. Okay, so on to composting. Why compost? Well, it's a practical and convenient way to handle yard trimmings. Instead of putting them in a bag and having the city pick them up, or if you don't do that, or just shoving them back on the back of your property or blowing all your leaves into your neighbor's yard, composting is a very convenient and practical way of dealing with the refuse that you have in your yard, also some refuse from inside your house. So it's easier and cheaper than bagging or paying someone to remove them. But what's most important is that it will improve your soil and the plants growing in it. That's a ready-made source of nutrients for your plants, and also it helps the soil structure. So if you have a garden, a lawn or trees, shrubs, or even planter boxes, you have a use for compost. And you don't have to buy it if you make it yourself. So what it does is it returns organic and carbon matter into the soil in a usable form. The organic matter will improve plant growth. It'll stimulate the growth of beneficial microorganisms, those little beasties in our ground that like to chew things up. If you have heavy clay soil, with compost you can loosen that clay and create a better drainage system in your yard. And that also allows for better root penetration. And it'll also improve the capacity of sandy soils to hold water and nutrients. And like I said, it adds essential nutrients to any soil. By improving your soil, you are actually improving the plant health. And I would argue you're also improving the planet health as well. So healthy plants clean the air, they conserve soil, they beautify the landscape, and they feed us. Yard trimmings and kitchen scraps, they take up landfill space. They will eventually break down, but we have a lot of other things competing for landfill space, like things that don't break down. So they make up to 20 to 30% of all household waste are yard trimmings and kitchen scraps. Grass clippings lower the efficiency of incinerator systems. So if your grass clippings are going to a landfill to be processed in some way, because of the high moisture, the incinerating systems don't work as well. And if you use compost, it reduces the need for pesticides and chemical fertilizers. So not only benefiting the planet, benefiting your immediate area, but also saves you some money. This is a little diagram here about composting your food scraps for a healthy planet. So instead of putting it in a landfill, let's get it back into to our soil in a usable fashion. Biological essentials. So composting materials provide food for the bacteria, which break down the matter, and microbes, and the fungi and the protozoa. So all those things work together with air or oxygen and moisture and heat to actually break down the components that you want to turn into usable earth. Springtails, mites, and other small insects and earthworms are also part of this process. It's not just the fungi and the bacteria. So things we can see and can't see all work towards breaking this down. So carbon and nitrogen are the basic needs, not only for us as living human creatures, but also for this process. So carbon in leaves or woody wastes, they provide the energy. Nitrogen provides a raw element of proteins and nucleic acids. So it's all about breaking down and then building. There's two types of composting. You can do what's called a slow and cold, where you need maybe, like if you were to take a leaf pile and you have something about 3 to 4 cubic feet, sprinkle it with some water and let it be. Eventually, it's going to compost. If you just don't do anything, it'll compost. It may take a couple years, but it will compost. So the advantages to this is that it's passive. You don't have to do a lot, little effort. And it can be done or you can put it in a bin or a tumbler. Like I have a tumbler right outside my side door near my kitchen. So all my kitchen scraps go into that. and I just keep it tumbling to get it moving and get the oxygen moving. But I also have to add brown things, carbon stuff, in order for the process to be complete. If I just threw in my kitchen scraps, it's going to end up being a smelly, gross, moldering, basically what it is now. So the disadvantage is that it takes a long time to compost that way. And this is important, any weeds and seeds and pathogens that may be in what you're composting won't get killed because the temperature won't raise up enough. And if you don't have something that you're containing it in, the little furry friends, like our raccoons and skunks and whatever, the neighbor cat or the feral cat or even a coyote, they're going to come and dig around because that smells like food to them. There's also called a fast and hot method of composting. So this you want sort of a larger pile. 27 cubic foot is usually good, but it requires more effort. So you're going to have to constantly be turning it to introduce air, and you're going to want to monitor the temperature and the moisture as well. And you've got to be very careful about the right mixture of components. So very careful about the browns and the greens and how much you get in there. And you want to also have it closed off from pests as well. So it's active, you get a higher quality of compost, it's quicker, and you can destroy seeds and pathogens because the temperature that is created by the actual composting method will break down destroy those seeds and kill a lot of those pathogens. Depending on what you're putting in it and how much and how often you're tending it, you could have your compost ready in a season. So like if you start in the spring, by fall, when it's a nice time to put compost in your gardens, you could have it ready by then. You'll need to do a little bit with it, and we'll get into that later. So disadvantage is it takes more effort. It's like having a pet, basically. Yeah. It takes commitment and it takes more space. I have never been successful in having just a compost tumbler and getting good compost at the end. So what can you compost? Low nitrogen browns. So think of browns as like leaves and straw and wood chips, shredded paper and newspaper, not the glossy kind, because you don't want any tape or glossy or a lot of vibrant inks on your paper. And wood ash in small amounts, because that will affect the pH of the soil if you're adding this compost in. High nitrogen greens, like kitchen scraps, fruit and vegetable. Cleaned eggshells, but you want them broken down into small pieces. Think of eating a large meal. If you have this huge cookie, it's going to take you longer to get through that cookie than if you have like little cookie bites that you can just, So small pieces create more surface area for the microbes and the chemical reactions to happen in order to create the compost. So coffee grounds and tea leaves, you can use some tea bags, but you want to maybe remove the staples from them because they're not going to compost. Grass clippings. Grass clippings are like gold. You want to heat up your compost pile? Put grass clippings in it. Weeds and plant trimmings. Now, you want to be careful with weeds because if it's a weed you don't want in your garden the next year and your compost pile is not hot enough to kill the seeds, you're going to be transferring those seeds over to to grow in your garden if you put that compost in. So anything like invasive weeds, you don't want to put in your compost pile. But I'll throw in like dandelion clippings. I like dandelions. Not only are they beneficial to our pollinators in the spring, but you can actually eat them. So, aged manure, and you got to be cautious about this, and I'll explain more. And I'm a baker, and I like to do sourdough. So if I'm not baking with my sourdough discard, it's like, well, what do I do with it? You don't want to put it down your sink because you have to put a lot of water in it. It could clog up your plumbing. Put it in your compost pile. It'll like it. What shouldn't you compost? Disease and infested plants. So if you have a plant that has died because of a disease, be it a fungus, a bacteria, or whatever, don't put it in your compost pile because you're just going to be transferring it for the future. Do not compost meat, bones, dairy, or oil, okay? And do not compost dog or cat or pig. That's really important because there are some farm animals, the manure we can use, but pig don't do it because they're omnivores. So they'll eat, pigs will eat a dead pig. I mean, that's, yeah. Or human, that should, that makes sense, right? But, or human waste. Do not compost pernicious weeds. So those weeds that you don't want in your garden, don't compost them. And then do not compost herbicide-treated plants. So that went to your question about spraying. You don't want to compost that. And do not compost non-biodegradable stuff, so tin foil or, tape or plastic and so on. Composting materials. So everything organic has a given ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Those are the two important things we're wanting to pay attention to here. So a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 30 to 1, so 30 carbon to 1 nitrogen is ideal for the activity of composting microbes to work on your compostables. So if you think of it as a 30 to 1 as a brown to green, so think of brown as the carbon, so we're talking leaves and wood chips and brown paper, stuff like that, and then to green, which is your organic sort of like your kitchen scraps and your grass clippings and stuff like that. You want to try and maintain a 30 to 1. This balance can be achieved by mixing the various ingredients. So, composting materials. So, sawdust, wood, and paper has a 400 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So very low in nitrogen, but very high in carbon. Things like straw and corn stalks, so you're decreasing the carbon, so that ratio is much smaller, so 80 and 60, and leaves about 50. So that's why these things in the brown stuff are considered to be sort of your carbon inputs for your compost. Fruit waste, rotted manure, okay, that's key. Food wastes and grass clippings and alfalfa and hay, they have a much lower carbon amount compared to the nitrogen. That's where your heat's going to get generated. So organic waste, newspaper, grass, leaves, fruit, vegetables, put it together, you get the microorganisms, you add some water and some air. We all need water and air to live. And carbon dioxide is given off. That creates heat, so that'll kill any pathogens, hopefully, any seeds that you don't want. And maybe seeds you do want, but you don't want, squash seeds in soil that you're going to plant your tomatoes in, And then all that works together to give you a finished compost. So the essentials of composting. The speed of composting is related, again, to the size of the pieces you put in. I talked about shredding your paper, ripping your cardboard, also chopping up your green matter too. Also, you don't want to throw a whole head of cabbage in. It will break down. But if you chop that, if you throw the coleslaw in instead of the cabbage, it's going to break down quicker. The size of the pile is also important. The bigger the pile, the better, because what that does is that creates sort of an environment for that heat to build. If you're going to have a 1 cubic yard, the heat is not going to be as high as if you have something like 27 cubic yards, just by the nature that it doesn't have that insulating property. So all life on Earth, including compost microbes, they need a certain amount of water and air as well. So again, if you just throw a bunch of leaves in a pile, eventually they're going to break down. But they'll break down quicker if you turn them and introduce air. And maybe if it's a dry spell, sprinkle a little water on it. Or if it's like really, really raining, you get too much water, so you might want to cover your compost pile. So it's finding that balance. So the microbes function best when there are many air passages, and I'll show you an ingenious way that I just started doing to ensure the introduction of air into a compost pile during the winter. And it's also, the moisture you want is like a wrung out sponge. Too much moisture is going to inhibit the process, not enough moisture. So find that sort of wrung out sponge. Now, nobody wants to go out and start, squeezing their compost, but you'll get a feel for how much is the right amount of moisture as you go on. So large piles, 5 by 5, are hotter than small ones, okay? You don't want the temperature necessarily to exceed 140, but the 140 degrees is that sweet spot. That's when you're going to start destroying pathogens and seeds that you may not want. A temperature of higher than 150 composting slows down, and you begin to see charring and burning. So, and that can be problematic in the summer. So I started a new composting. I started fast composting for the first time this year. I built this whole system, and I have pictures of it. I put in a bunch of greens and browns, and I went out 3 days later and I turned it and I saw ash, and there was steam coming up. So it was doing its job. I also have a thermometer that I can monitor the temperature. So you'll know when your compost pile is working, and it smells good too. That's another indication. So you do want to be careful. There have been people who have started fires in their compost pile, and so only you can prevent your yard catching on fire and burning your neighbor's garage because of your compost pile.
Or fence.
Yes, a fence, your own garage, whatever, yeah. So the recommended recipe, so for actually creating a compost pile, you want to remove the grass and sod cover over where you want to put your pile. You don't have to, but it helps, because what that does is that gives microbes the chance to actually be in contact with what you want them to basically start working on. So your first layer should consist of about 3 to 4 inches of chopped brush or other coarse material. And what this does is that allows air to come in from the bottom. I know some people who will take small sticks and put it in the bottom of their compost pile. I did that at first, but then I found when I was turning, I was just ending up moving the sticks around, and that really annoyed me. So I didn't do that. But you want that bottom layer to be a coarse material. So don't just dump a bunch of grass and then build from there. So do things like leaf matter, or maybe small sticks or straw or something like that. And again, this allows air circulation around the base of the heap. The second layer, you want about 6 to 8 inches of mixed scraps and leaves and grass clippings. And it should be sponge damp. When I'm doing my layering, like if I'm out mowing, I'll dump some leaves on, kind of spread it around, and have my garden hose and water it down before I go to my next layer. And then your third layer, you want maybe about 1 inch of soil. And so get some soil from around your garden. So that's going to be adding the microorganisms that you already have in your yard. That adds them to the pile, and you can say, here, go eat this. Your fourth layer, and this is optional, 2 to 3 inches of aged manure, okay? And that'll provide nitrogen needed by the microorganisms. However, it can increase the potential for flies, and you add water if the manure is dry. You can also add 1 pound of urea fertilizer to 10 pounds of or 10 pounds of composted poultry manure. If you keep chickens, you're golden, because that manure with the bedding and everything is the best type of manure you can add to your compost pile. If you don't have nitrogen, adding this manure will add the nitrogen to it. And then you just repeat. Now, something about manure. If you add manure, you want to make sure that you are doing hot composting. Okay? Don't add manure to a pile that you're just going to leave and not take care of and hope that next spring you're going to have compost. Because you want to get that 140 degrees temperature for, I would say, 3 to 7 days working in order to kill any pathogens and weeds. But mainly with manure, you want to worry about pathogens. Again, don't use human, dog, cat, or pig waste. If using horse manure, now I know my mother, who was born in England and she was raised during World War II, and she would talk about how back then the milk would be delivered by cart, horse cart. And her mother would position them when the cart was coming down with a pail and a coal pail and a coal shovel. And she would make them run out into the street after the cart went by just to get that horse manure so she could add it to her garden. So I have a friend who raises horses, so I have a source of horse manure. I didn't know this until I started researching this, that you don't want to just add horse manure and think, oh, great. Horses eat hay that a lot of times have been treated with what's called persistent pesticides. And by persistent meaning they don't break down, they don't go away. They're in the hay, and then the horses eat them. So what are they going to do? They're going to poop it out. So if you add that to your compost pile and it breaks everything down, you're going to have those herbicides or pesticides in your compost. And then when you go to grow these beautiful dahlias or whatever you're growing, or any of your, especially like your fruits and your vegetables, that's not only going to be probably having an effect on the growth of those. It might kill them. You might not be able to grow them. But then you're going to be taking, if you're doing it on fruits and vegetables, you're going to be eating those pesticides. And I don't know about you, but I want to eat as little pesticide as possible. So if you're unsure about, if you're using horse manure and you're unsure about what they're being fed, don't put it in any compost that you're going to use for things that you're going to ingest. Just do it for your ornamental plants. So it's less of an issue with cow and pig, or excuse me, no, not pig, cow and chicken. Sheep, I'm not sure. I've never heard of sheep manure. I think they like to just go poop in a pile over where nobody can get it. Anyway, you want to be really, really careful. The other thing is you want, if you're going to add, let's say, just manure to your soil separate from compost, don't add fresh manure. That's really, really hot, and that's going to burn anything that you put it into contact with. So you want it aged. You can buy bags of compost that has aged manure in it, and usually that's cow manure. Once you've created your pile, you want to scoop out a basin on the top to catch any rainwater. Okay. Now, if you're in a big, if you have a lot of rain like we have recently, that might be too much. So you might want to throw a tarp over it. So I'm going to tarp my pile this winter because of the snow and everything. I'm still going to monitor the temperature. Like I said, I have a probe. They're really cheap. You can get them on Amazon, or you can get them at Petit's or whatever. It's just basically a giant turkey thermometer. You just stick it right in there. A properly made heap with all the right ingredients will reach about 140 degrees in 4 to 5 days. And then once that starts happening and the process takes hold, you're going to start seeing that your pile, which was huge, is going to start to settle as things break down. Okay? And that's a good sign that that the process is working. So working with the compost once you have it. So as you're going, once you've created your pile, maybe 3 to 4 weeks after creating it, you want to sort of fork the material and get it mixed up. So turn the outside of the old heap into the center of a new pile. So that's where a composting bin system, when I say bin, I don't mean the tumbler bins, but I mean sort of built bins. That's where that really works great, because you could have one side that you're adding things to, and then if you want to turn them, you can actually fork them over into the empty bin and get that mixing going. Add water if necessary, if it's really dry, And you do want to turn it 2 to 3 times. You don't want to just stick it and then walk away. You do want to get that air in there. If you're doing hot composting and you're adding a nice level of brown to green, and you're monitoring the temperature and the moisture, you can have ready to use compost within 3 to 4 months. And you'll know it's ready to use when it begins to cool and you're not seeing any further breakdown. And then the material becomes dark brown, crumbly, and earthy smelling. You can tell if a compost pile is working by the smell of it. If it smells like a garbage heap, it's not working. But if it smells like the earth, and I think you guys all know what I mean by that, it's probably working. Yes?
Is it maintaining approximately 140 degrees during this 3 to 4 month period?
So I think if you're actively adding new things to it, there's going to be a rise and fall in your temperature. As you start adding, like when I add grass clippings to mine gets up to 160. So then I have to add more browns and monitor the water, moisture amount and everything to sort of keep it at that sweet spot of 140. Though I don't know why, I get a little excited when I go out to my compost pile and I see that it's hot and I turn it and there's steam and it smells wonderful. I feel like, I don't know, like a baker or something. Yeah. So I do want to say, though, your compost is never going to look like garden soil that you're going to go out and buy. There's going to be some things in there that haven't broken all the way down that if you want to use it, you're going to want to sift them a little bit, and I talk about that. So using it, you can use it for as a germination medium. So you want to use aged compost, and you want to screen it. So you're getting rid of all those big pieces that have not yet broken down and separating them from the parts that have broken down. If you're going to use them for plant seedlings, you want that compost to be at least 4 to 6 months old, okay? Because plant seedlings are very tender and they're more susceptible to heat and variations in plant nutrients. I'm going to be giving a talk on starting your plants from seed in the spring. I think it's going to be the first one. Yeah. The medium that you plant them in, you don't have to have a medium that's full of a lot of nutrients. Everything that a plant needs to start life is contained within that seed. All you have to do is give it a material to grow in, and water and heat. But you don't have to start hitting it with fertilizer or this nutrient or that nutrient until after it gets its little green hair. And at that point, that's when you need to start adding the nutrients. But old compost makes great seed starting material. If you have root crops, you want to apply maybe 1 to 2 inches of a layer of compost and work it in well to the upper part of your soil. In the fall, leave it on the surface I have raised beds, so my compost pile will not be ready, but I'm going to get some compost and I'm going to put it on the surface of my raised beds and then mulch it with leaves. And that's how I'm preparing them for the winter. And that includes the garlic that I'm going to be planting this fall. I'm going to be giving another talk later in the year on growing alums, which includes garlic and onions and all of that. So garlic is wonderful because you can plant it in the fall, and then by midsummer you have all this wonderful garlic, and save the best ones and just repeat the process. So easy to grow. You want to keep the organic matter near the soil surface, and that's known as mulch gardening. It's much easier to control weeds in your garden if the organic matter, the compost and stuff that you've put in, is at the surface. So then you can just pull them out because you're not going to kill every single seed from if you put like grass clippings or garden scraps into your compost pile. Not every single seed is going to get killed, so you probably will be transferring some weeds, but if they're at the upper part of the soil, you can pull them out really easily. If you're going to the compost that you do put onto the soil surface doesn't have to be as decomposed as if you're going to work it into an actual seed bed. Troubleshooting. So if your compost has a bad odor, it's not getting enough air, you want to turn it and add dry material. I talked about my compost tumbler that's outside my door. My partner's like, what the hell is going on here? Because this smells like a garbage heap. And it does. I need to get rid of that. I'm not adding enough brown to it because I'm so enamored of my big compost pile in the backyard that I'm ignoring that one. That's just becoming a way station for the stuff that I eventually want to get into my big compost pile. So I start by putting it in a little bin in the house, and I get all these fruit flies and everything. And then I take it out and I put it in my tumbler, and I'll occasionally throw brown paper in there and I'll tumble it and stuff like that. And it's in an area where enough water seeps into it. But I'm going to, before the winter, I'm going to take all that, I'm going to work it into my large compost pile, and that's where it's really going to break down. If the center of the pile is dry, it's not getting enough water. Sprinkle it with some water. If it's damp and warm only in the middle, it's too small. Again, the larger it is, the hotter it'll get, and the more the process will take place. So collect more material and mix the old ingredients into a new pile and turn it. If the heap is damp and sweet smelling but still will not heat up, there's not enough nitrogen. So mix in nitrogen sources like fresh grass clippings, manure, composted poultry manure, blood meal. So if you put blood meal in, you're going to get critters because they're going to go for that blood meal, and urea fertilizer. When I compost, I know my compost pile is going to heat up when I put my grass clippings in it, and I mix it, and I get really excited. It's the little things. So types of compost bins. You can get really creative. You can take some snow fence and make this like little bin, or you can do a block bin, which is what I did previous to what I'm doing now. Woven wire as well in wooden pallets, or you can make turning beds like this. Turning beds, they're convenient for turning the material on a regular schedule. I talked about starting your pile in one, and when you need to turn it over into the next side. And that allows the compost to cure faster. And that's appropriate for gardens with a large volume of yard trimmings. I have just under an acre, and maybe about half of that I mow. I don't maintain a lawn. I don't treat it with anything. I don't water it. Most of what's there are, sedges and beneficial weeds for pollinators. But I do have to keep it cut because the city doesn't like it if I don't, nor do my neighbors. But I use those clippings in my compost bins. So, and then also things from my garden that I know are okay. And that all goes into making this high quality compost. So again, I'll show you a picture of my new bins. You can tell I'm very proud of them. Then there's also these compost tumblers that you can buy. They come in a variety of styles, and they're commercially available. You can order them on Amazon, and they can be big or they can be small. Some of them have this thing where they actually collect what they call compost tea. So any of the liquid, and there's a lot of liquid in these things, runs off and collects in this bin below, and you can drain that out and dilute that, and that's another source of nutrients for your plants. Don't add that compost tea directly to your plants. It's too strong. You want to dilute it to add it to your plants. And these are just basically, I think this one over here, this one I think it probably has a hand crank on it. This one, you just got to get in there and that can be really difficult because as that stuff settles and collects moisture, it gets really heavy. So it's like turning a concrete mixer over. Same with this one. So simple heaps or trenches, if you want to go really sort of low key and not put a whole lot of thought into it, it's going to be slow, but you can do it. So yard trimmings can be easily composted in open heaps. Or you can just dig a trench and start putting your stuff in and bury your kitchen scraps. That looks like that's from like the 1970s or the 1980s, doesn't it? Those cut off jeans. And I can never do that in my yard because there's too many things to scratch and bite and worry about ticks and stuff like that. It's probably on some commune in California or something. Okay, winter composting. So we're heading into winter if you haven't noticed. And you're not going to be as probably visiting your compost pile as much, especially if you're like me, and that means having to trounce through snow to get to it. So there are things you can do. The process won't stop. It'll slow down, but it won't stop. Things you can do. You can cover your pile to exclude excess rain and snow, which is what I'm going to do, because you want to try and maintain that sponge-like consistency. So you can cover it and then ignore it and see what you get the next year. Or you can go out and maybe investigate and look at the consistency. But a tarp will also help insulate the pile. Now I'm going to use a tarp that actually has holes in it, so a certain amount of moisture will get in. It's just an old tarp. So we'll see how that works. So size is important. Again, you need at least 1 cubic yard, but the bigger is the better. Okay, bigger is better in this case for keeping that process going. And it says consider a compost thermometer, and that way you can monitor the temperature. And it's nice because they'll have in there, it's not only is it a scale, a temperature scale, but it kind of shows you where that ideal, and it'll say like active, and then it'll say hot, depending on the temperature that it's reading. And if you can continue to aerate it, work it with a fork. Now if it's a frozen, block of ice, you're not going to be able to do that. Or install some perforated PVC pipes, and that's what I've done on one half of mine, because I want to see how this works. You can do it vertical, like a chimney, or horizontal, like a bed rail. But you want them to be perforated, so the air can get in and get out of the pipes and get into the pile. And like everything else, composting does slow down in the winter. So here's an example of some perforated PVC pipes, and it looks like they're using a bin that's made out of some fencing, and they're just sticking the pipes in there and putting. Now, one of the disadvantages to this is it's going to make, if you want to do any sort of forking of it, it's going to be a little difficult. So I've stuck my pipe right in the middle, and if I want to continue to fork it, if it's not getting enough air, I can do it around the pipe. But that would annoy me. Yes?
Did you use the PVC pipes in the spring and summer?
I don't know. I'm gonna see how that works. Again, it's an experiment I'm doing on one side of my compost pile. But I think it's probably more geared towards a time when you're not going to be out there manually aerating. If you're out there turning your pile every week or every few days, you probably wouldn't need these pipes. Yeah. So here is my composting bin. Yay! So what I did is I work at Cleveland Clinic main campus, and we get a lot of stuff in. I work in research. So I had my buddy George, who I've known for almost 30 years working there, save me some pallets. Now it's important, you want to make sure that the pallets are not treated, and I should have figured out what it was. There's a thing that you can find out online. They treat pallets with chemicals so they don't break down. So there's certain chemicals you don't want to use. It's sort of like you don't want to use tires to make a raised bed because there's stuff that leaches out of the tire material. You want to be careful with these pallets as well. But I wished I had written down what it was, but I made sure that I don't have the nasty ones. Okay, and I created a 2-bin system. You can see here's one side and here's another side over here. And I stabilized it with some metal garden posts. Of course, everywhere I wanted to put one, I hit a root, so it doesn't look as nice. And then I just nailed some slats on the outside. But what I also did is I put chicken wire. So it'll hold most of the material in, but also allow air transfer through it. So it's not a complete closed system. And I debated, I've seen where some people say put maybe some, not chicken wire, but building hardware cloth on the bottom to stop like little burrowing critters from coming up, or put some cardboard to stop like ground weeds and so on and so forth. I have found that by putting the hardware cloth, again, as I'm forking, I'm hitting the hardware cloth. And that really annoys me, so I have to be careful. But then if I'm not able to fork down low enough, I'm not getting that stuff on the bottom. So I may change that. And then I just started adding, you know, my browns and my greens, and then you can see it's already starting to decompose here, and I stuck my thermometer in here, and I'm up in past the steady active zone into the hot area, not quite at 160, but it was going great guns, and that was after adding the greens and some water. What I'd eventually like to do is I'd like to put some gates on the front, so to keep out the little critters that might want to get in there and burrow around. Also, we have a colony of feral cats that we are taking care of, and they like to get in there and use it as a litter box, so I don't want that. They were doing that in my raised beds too, and I'm like, wait a minute. One of those movement-activated sprinklers work really well to keep. So this is my bin system. If I were to have taken a picture of it today, I have things going on both sides. I'm going to be adding some more grass clippings, and I got a bagging system for my lawnmower, my riding mower, to get chop up leaves to add to it. So yeah, I've started my journey into hot composting, and you know, it's kind of fun, and we'll see what I get at the by springtime. I'll probably screen out some stuff and start using it in my garden, all being well, fingers crossed. So you can get really creative. Before this, I had a 2-bin system with cinder blocks, but I just ended up using it as a waste pile, a garden waste pile, and nothing was happening. I was getting too many greens in there and not enough browns, and it just became this nondescript pile. It wasn't really doing anything. I did use that, though, to mix in with my new pile, and that added all the microbes and the good beasties that you want to get this going. So here is this QR code. If you take a picture of it with your phone, it'll take you to the University of Maryland Extension office, and it'll take you to their Composting Basics page. It has a lot of great information, but there's also, you can find information on OSU Extension site and all the other ones. When you're looking for gardening information and you go to Google or whatever search engine you use, and you type in, you know, how do I compost? Be sure to put .edu at the end. And what that's going to do is that's going to filter out a lot of crap. You'll still get some, but it'll pull in articles from agricultural extension groups, like the very first one, Washington State University, a lot of OSU, stuff from down south or whatever, and try and pick places that are near us, because they're going to be sort of catering their information to similar growing conditions. But there's a lot of information out there. I'm not saying that, you know, Farmer's Almanac site doesn't have some good stuff for Better Homes and Garden. They do, but they tend to not focus solely on the research-based information, and that's really important. So anything you find on an extension site, it's going to be based in research. It's going to be based in trial and error and collecting facts and sifting through them to come up with the best answer. Citations, again, Master Gardeners, we're all about the science, what's been proven over time. So these are my citations for all the information that is in here. I got it from these sites. And there's many more. I just happen to use these sites. So, summary, composting at home. It helps protect the environment. It saves money. It improves your soil, which improves the earth. It can be fast or slow, passive or active. So, if you have questions about not only composting, but gardening in general, March through October, I know it's November now, we man a call line Tuesdays 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. You can call that number, so write it down for the future. Or you can go online to ohioline.osu.edu And there's a lot of fact sheets and bulletins. And again, if you're going to be doing internet research, make sure that you put site.edu or .edu, and you're going to get fact-based information. Thank you.